welcome everyone to another Data Visualization Society Fireside Chat. Super excited to present this today. A little bit about the Data Visualization Society first. We are a society of almost, I think, 14,000 data viz practitioners. And you can join the society at datavisualizationsociety.com to learn more. There's a bunch of different programs. We have a very active Slack community. We do these fireside chats. Yeah, you can learn all about that on our website. Today's fireside chat is data art and creative coding. And so I have some really exciting folks that have amazing data art practices joining me today, and we're going to chat about creative coding and data art. Before we go there, this Zoom and this fireside chat, Zoom was provided by Excella. So thank you very much, Excella, for giving us our Zoom account for today. And I guess let's learn about the people that you're going to be spending some time with today. So I guess me first, my name is Julia Krolik. I do a bunch of the things that are on that slide. I'm going to moderate for today. And yeah, I'm extremely excited. So without further ado, enough about me, let's talk about the actual panelists. So first we have Eleanor Lutz, and I'm going to let her introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Eleanor Lutz. Thanks, Julia, for having me on the show. And I do information design work. Right now, I have a one-year internship fellowship at the graphics desk, the New York Times. And before that, I did some freelance work. And I was working on a PhD in data science. So that's kind of what I was.
Amazing. And next we have Kirill. I put my accent on that, Kirill Benzi, and let him introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. So I'm a data artist almost full-time now. I also work as head of research in a company called Equino in France. And basically we do digital transformation. And I'm focusing more on data science, machine learning, that I try to basically communicate through data art. And I also founded my data art studio called Kirillion on my name. It's not very original, I know. And I also lecture and data viz in several universities in France and in Lausanne. And I think we have some people from Lausanne, so special hi to them. And I'm really excited to be here.
Amazing. And last but not least, we have Shirley Wu. So I'll let Shirley talk about herself.
Thank you, Julia. Hi, everyone. My name is Shirley, and I'm an independent creative, and I focus on data-driven art and visualizations. So for my day-to-day, I work a lot with different sorts of clients, usually within like tech or media or journalism. But once in a while, I get like a special art museum sort of client, or where I just get to like be really creative, and that's when I get to do my data art. Or sometimes I'll do a personal project where I get to do some data art. And you might know some of my work from a project called Data Sketches with my friend Nadi Bremer. But yeah, very excited to be here. Love data art. Love combining my software engineering background with my very amateur, never happened artist career. So those are my two great passions.
Amazing. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm going to stop sharing this now so everyone can see us. Awesome. So, nope, Eleanor's back. Lost her for a minute. So, I mean, I think the very first thing that would be the most important thing is to really talk about data art as, you know, a collection, as a pair of words, and what these words mean when we talk about data art. If you Google data art, you don't really get an official definition per se. So I think that it would be amazing to kind of define as, you know, does data art mean that data is the medium in an art practice? Is data, you know, the tool? How? Because it's used, you know, in you know, to create art. I think that everyone probably has a bit of a different definition, and I think it'd be really great to go around and kind of listen to how you guys define data art. Maybe Shirley, if you want to start first, and then pass it on to someone else.
Oh yeah. Sure. So I actually have kind of this mental model where it spans from data visualization to data art to generative art. And that's kind of like how I explain it when somebody asks me like, oh, you do data visualization, but there's also data art. Like, what's this difference? And so in my mind, data visualization is when we use data and we present it in such a way where we're trying to communicate across certain patterns or messages or insights. And so that's when like, we have a really important responsibility and duty to make sure that we're presenting the data as accurately as we can. And we might get really criticized if we don't. And so to me, data art is really fun because data art in my mind is when we get to kind of, I tend to use data as the kind of, the source, and then I map that to kind of more creative encodings and generate something more artistic and aesthetic and fun. And it's more about making something that makes me happy because of how beautiful it is and less about meaning. And so in my mind, there's less restrictions, although I found that it's a lot of times harder because it's hard to make something look beautiful when it's like got very specific encodings. And that's why I also kind of compare it to generative art, because generative art is when you map kind of randomness to creative encodings. And oftentimes that looks super beautiful because you can kind of like really randomize and get it to a place that's really beautiful. Whereas with data art, you're kind of restricted by the data that you start with. But I like kind of that in between data art part. That's how I think about it, yeah.
I just realized that I myself muted. I love what you said kind of about this idea of rigor in the data and data art kind of allowing a little bit of a looseness around it. I did a project once in clinical microbiology where I, after doing all of the procedural stuff, used the bacteria as paint, and it had that same similar sentiment of taking away like all of the rules of clinical identification that would be like so inherent in that and just playing around with it. And I think that's kind of interesting when we go from some of these more traditional kind of scientific ways and approaches to something, and then kind of almost at the results level or the discussion level, if you will, or kind of allow ourselves to get creative.
Yeah.
Eleanor, what do you think? You're muted.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. About data art as a term, and how do you define it in your practice? Oh, did we lose Eleanor?
Okay, maybe I can take over while she connects. I think Shirley did like the perfect explanation. I don't have anything to add. No, I'm kidding. But I think that, I mean, it's something that we have to like explain to people quite a lot because it's not like very well known so far. But of course, after this Fireside chat, I mean, it's going to be worldwide famous. So this is what we do, right? I think for me, it's exactly what you said. I would just add that to me, data art is about putting emotions first, whereas Stative is more about being efficient in the communication, right? And as an artist, then if you talk about your art piece, then you need to have a message, right? In theory, right? So to me, data art helps me focus on the message and try to like transform the data so that it reflects it. Whereas, as you said, data viz, you are very constrained because people can criticize you, and it's something that a ton of people have told me. It's beautiful what you do, but what's the point? And then you can always argue. So, do we need to have a point? And I think in data art, yes. In generative art, no. But in data art, when you start to explain to people, but look, this is based on this data set, and it means if you know how to read this image, it shows you that blah blah blah. Then people start to realize that you have this emotions because you find it beautiful, but at the same time you can also develop cognition about the data set. And so I think that it's actually more powerful as a way of to communicate. And if I may, I did a very quick study. I think we have 250 answers so far, and 84% of people found that data art is actually a good way to communicate scientific ideas. So because it's based on a data set and also finding more, they found that it was more interesting than just, talking like about the science right away without any picture. So because it's a nice picture, you attracted to the image. then you want to look closer, you read the description or you have someone explaining it to you, and then you realize, oh, it's real data. So maybe I can be part of the data artwork myself. And then it becomes really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, if you go into a gallery, if you experience art, there's definitely, at least for me, a point where do I see myself in it, or how does it relate? There's that like relatability aspect of it as well. So if that's captured, I think that's amazing. Eleanor, you're back.
Awesome.
We lost you for a minute. How do you define data art in your practice? What does data art mean to you?
Yeah, I guess I was trying to think about this question for a while, and I realized that most of what I end up finishing ends up being more on the data visualization side, where things are like a little more maybe like based around accuracy instead of expression. So for me, I guess data art is the part of the process where I really just first get the data and I start exploring whatever I want. Like, what does this even look like? What can I do with it? And at that point, I'm just kind of interested in seeing what pretty pictures I can make with the data. And yeah, so I think you were asking whether we think data is a medium or like the process or something. So I don't know, I think the same data can be the medium for art and viz. It's just it's like a spectrum that you're in between.
That's awesome. Yeah, I really like what you said, Kirill, about this idea of it kind of being like almost science communication as well, in a way, to take something that's, you know, from a spreadsheet or a CSV file or whatever data exists, to giving it, you know, a visual interpretation, but then to throw it into, you know, a gallery setting or somewhere where, you know, like even thinking about platforms and like the way that you experience it as well, I think is really interesting. In terms of creative inspiration, the next thing I'd love to talk to you guys about is like what actually drives the creativity. How do you choose the data that you focus on? Like before we even get to the part where you have a data set, how did you like walk up and decide, okay, this is the data set that I'm going to use, or I'm going to invest my time and energy into, to then kind of spend time with it to give it my creativity as a practitioner to then get it to become data art? How do you make those decisions? Maybe Kirill, do you want to go next?
Yeah, so first I would say it depends whether or not this is a client work, right? So if sometimes you do a data art piece for a company, and so basically you chat with the client and you try to find which data set that they have in-house could be used. And so the first question I always ask is, what is the point? What is the message, right? Because if you do, people are going to have a hard time figuring like the whole piece out, because it's going to be difficult, but it's going to look beautiful, hopefully. So what is the message that you want? Can we find like the core data set that would exactly reflect what you want to say? But at the same time, we have this duty of being truthful to the data. So this is what I try to warn them. Okay, we're gonna take the data set that you're gonna find the best data set, but at the same time, if it shows your company is failing, I can change the colors and put them blue instead of red. But at some point, if people try to like understand the data set, there's gonna be difficult. So if it's like this, we basically have to play with the client like data set. Otherwise, I try to first find an idea or like a message, and then I try to browse like open source data set, because I think it's easier, and it goes well with the reproducible science thing that we try to do in science, so that everyone can check whether or not the data is accurate. So I like to have this, maybe it's my scientific side, and to play with these data sets first.
That's awesome. So, I mean, even just backing up a little more, I'm still curious. I want to push just a tiny bit. Like, how did you decide to say even study or kind of be in the field that you're in? Like, because I think there's creativity around that, right? Because you do have kind of a crossover between your academic work and your art somewhat. So like did the academic work come first and then you kind of branched
it's
out?
a funny story. It's a funny story. So Basically, I was doing my PhD in network science, so really focusing on network viz, not network viz, but networks in general. And when you do like a PhD or anything, people ask you, hey, what are you working on? It's the classic boring question. But at that time, I didn't realize that it was just out of courtesy. So I was trying to, and again, taking my blackboard, whiteboard, trying to draw like math and everything. And then I realized, like, just by looking at them, that I mean, it was just like, hey, the same question as just, hey, how you doing? It was the same thing. And I was a bit frustrated because I realized, come on, I would like to, it's really interesting what I'm doing. So I would like to find a way to explain it to people. And then I found out that, maybe I could, start to add more visuals in my work. And because I was working in networks, it's pretty easy to do a network visualization. You have tons of software to do that. And this is how I started to, do like classical network viz. And because I used to do digital art when I was like a teenager, and my parents are also artists, I realized that I could maybe take the scientific techniques and like transform them into something more artistic, and hopefully will also like attract people because it would look beautiful, but at the same time, it's based on science. And this is where I find this calling of basically trying to talk about science, like data science and AI, but in a visual way and using art. And this is how I switched to the data viz field and now data art.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for letting me dig a little deeper. Shirley, how about you? Do you want to go next? How do you decide on the work that you kind of work on and the data sets you choose to work with? I mean, I think really would love to hear about like self-directed or stuff that comes just from your own creativity as opposed to necessarily client work, because I think once you have a client job, you have some flexibility there, but ultimately their audience is guiding that. But for any self-directed pieces that you have worked on, I'd love to know how you have come to those creative inspirations.
Yeah, definitely. So actually, if you don't mind pulling up the second slide that I did, I think I can talk more specifically about some of the projects.
Yep.
But in general, I like to approach all of my projects with a curiosity about the world. And so, for example, the very first one, Film Flowers, that was like probably my very first data art piece, and I didn't even realize it was a data art piece. That one was for data sketches, and we had the topic about movies, and I was trying to think about like, oh, we're in summer right now, okay, like summer blockbusters, like I wonder about like how many of these summer blockbusters I've seen. And then it was kind of like a weird, you ask about inspiration and where it comes from. So I think inspiration for data sets for me come from like a curiosity I have about the world, but the inspiration for visuals oftentimes come from like nature or museums or just like kind of my like day-to-day experiences. And so like for Film Flowers, I think I was like looking at fireworks and I was like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if I did something like fireworks or sunflowers? And that's essentially how Film Flowers came to be. And I didn't realize that would be counted more as data art than data visualization at the time. I just made these and like encoded data and I was like, cool, made this piece. And then I've always had kind of like an obsession with flowers throughout my life. So then I did a piece for SF MoMA. That's kind of the next one. And that one I was like, I'm just gonna make flowers because I love it. But then I think as I've kind of gone along in my practice, I've been kind of trying to be more intentional with the visuals that I use and having it tie back to the data. And so the bottom three are actually all, the bottom left and middle are self-directed projects. So I can talk a little bit more about those. So those were actually very much more intentional than the top two in that those were not only that I had a curiosity about the world, but those were things that I realized I felt really strongly about. And those were kind of like what Carol had mentioned earlier about trying to communicate across a message or trying to communicate across an emotion. And so the inspiration really came from the crystals one, that one is the Women Nobel Laureates. And that one, I really wanted to find kind of legendary female, like legendary women through history. And that was the motivation. And that that kind of project has led me to go down a bunch more projects that are around women and representation or underrepresentation in history. So all of the bottom ones kind of fall within those categories. But at the end of the day, what really drives me is that I want to create something beautiful that can draw people in. But because it's drawn people in, then they can kind of peel back the layers of, oh, this thing that's a crystal, that's kind of pretty, but actually each of these crystals represent a woman Nobel laureate. And oh, but like if you actually look at all of the patterns of these crystals, you can notice that they're severely underrepresented. And there's like only 53 women Nobel laureates as opposed to 850 something. And so those are the kind of the ways that my data art has evolved over the years, but the inspiration is always a curiosity.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that and for showing off some of the projects. That's amazing. Eleanor, what about you? How do you choose some of the work that you have worked on? I know you love space,
Yeah.
as I've seen. And I know Art the Science has featured your virus card gifts, but I'm wondering, are some of these client projects, or like, can you speak to some of the ones that are more just like self-directed and how you found inspiration to work on the ones that you have? Do you want me to share anything, or do you want to just screen share? Screen share if you decide.
Okay. Yeah, I can screen share if I have stuff to show.
And actually, one thing before you speak, I forgot to let everyone know, I see questions coming in, and we'll save some time at the end. So we'll for sure go through and so if you use the Q&A box, and I see a couple of people have already, you can type your question in there, and then I'll go through and hopefully we'll have time for some. Yeah, sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so like, where do I get inspiration? I just really like learning stuff. So all the stuff I do in my free time, like self-directed work, usually is not related to things I'm doing for work. So lots of people are like, oh, like when are you gonna make a graphic about, I did research in mosquito navigation for a while, but I've still never made a data art piece about it, because that was what I spent all day doing. And when I got home and had some free time, I just wanted to do something else and learn something totally different. So maybe I can show, I can share my screen. So some of the stuff I got really interested in a few years ago is space. I did a series of space maps. So like this one, where the Arctic ice sheets are animated and moving, or different planets, and this one's the moon, different places in the solar system. Let's see. And then, and then this one was my favorite. This is like a map of a lot of the asteroids in the solar system. And it's kind of shown in a more artistic way. And it uses like a scale that squishes the space a little bit. So it's not probably the most representational way to show that. But yeah, none of those were client work. That was more that I was really interested in, things like stars and asteroids. And I realized that NASA just puts out all those giant data sets that are really fun to play with, like really well documented. Like Charles said, I also really enjoy open data sets. I think they're very fun.
Thanks so much, everyone. I kind of have a tangent question that I'm gonna pop in there just because it seems relevant. But what do you guys think about this idea around data set availability and that being a factor in inspiration, right? Because I think that there's, if I've gone out and I know I need to invest a significant amount of time in collecting data, that's part of like a process of creation, versus having open data or having data that's available. And then rather than being on the collection side for a project, I'm on the exploring the data side. and seeing if there's enough data to represent something, or just going through data sets, like almost like a scavenger hunt to see, or treasure hunt to see if I can find something that I like. But I'm finding like it's kind of one or the other, because it is a commitment to incorporate data collection to produce a data set then you will work with, versus just having the availability of data, or going searching for data versus collecting it. I want to know your thoughts on like collection versus looking for open data that you can use. Shirley,
Maybe
oh yeah, go ahead.
I can, I don't know, or sorry.
Go for it. No, go ahead, Kirill.
So maybe I can share my screen too, right? Because now we are sharing
Yes,
screens, right? So
we got there. We are now all on sharing screen terms.
All right. So let me try to share this. So you should see my screen right now, right?
Yep.
So I'm gonna show you one, because this is my favorite piece actually, but I can show it to you without the copyright. It took me 8 months to create the data set, because it was an academic work. And what we did basically was to collect all the visits. So it's free data, right? But you had to, it's on Wikipedia. So each node that you see, it's like tons of different nodes, is actually a group of pages that people tend to visit all together. So when people go on Wikipedia, we all do that, right? You go on Wikipedia for a specific query, but then you roam around, because 50% of all the requests are on people. So you look for this particular, actor on Hollywood. When you click, then you click on his wife, and then but she played it, she in this movie, and then you click on the movie, and then you go around and you basically roam around Wikipedia. And so this data set is about 6 million. So there's 6 million articles in Wikipedia English, but there's 300 million links between all the pages, the blue links, the wiki links. So this is like the graph that we use. And on top of that, we added more than 5 billion visits. So it's and the visits is just 1 year of visits on Wikipedia. So this data set was really hard to collect. And at the time, we wanted to basically understand what people were like, what were the most favorite topics. And you can basically see that in the image. You have like denser areas here, and so this was in 2015. And if you have to guess, so let me ask people a question: what would be, remember this date, 2015, what would be the most popular page on Wikipedia, and which area, like which topics would be the most popular, do you think?
Is it the Olympics?
Sorry?
Either the Olympics? Yeah, is it the Olympics? If it's 2016, please don't tell me it's the presidential election.
It's not 16. It's 15. But it's about a movie. And think about it. So we had to write a paper, describing the data set and saying, okay, in this data set, the most popular page is a cheesy movie with shades and gray and some,
Oh, that's
right?
funny. At first, I was going to guess like Interstellar or something, but I am way off.
No. And this cluster here that you see, like this pink, very dense cluster, is only about Game of Thrones, which are like the most popular pages at the time on Wikipedia.
Wow.
And they're all very well connected, because all the actors, are like linked to each other, and all the episodes and the series. And we found out that actually Wikipedia is mostly about gossip, and it's very like unintuitive as a result, because you think it's the encyclopedia of all knowledge, but it's not about this. We all go on Wikipedia just to look at our favorite actors and the latest political scandals and things like this. And this was very surprising as a result. That this is about so the data set was really interesting, and I think to me this piece has more value because I put so many months in creating the data set than just finding one online.
Right. Well, that's awesome. That's a great example. What about you, Eleanor, in terms of like data collection versus, like you said, going to something like NASA, where there's like a repository and looking for data versus collecting data?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I really do like open source data, but I think that's one of the issues with that. Or actually, even with internet data in general, like it's relatively easy to get these giant data sets of what people are doing on the internet, or these public data sets. But So in some ways that's great that we have all these data sets you can work with, but I think in some ways, sometimes because of that, a lot of people make data viz about what's available. And it might, I don't know if it's like a really good reflection of what's actually happening in the world a lot of the time. I think we get like a giant cluster of data viz examples when one of these big data sets goes online because everyone's really excited about it. And then, yeah, I don't know if it's like a problem or like if just more data needs to be open source, but I think it's important to think about what data viz just doesn't exist. Yeah.
What about you, Shirley? Collection of data versus looking for data?
I actually, it's such an interesting question and tangent because I was just thinking about this and
I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself.
Oh yeah, but I was just thinking about this and I guess my answer is gonna just span the visualization and art kind of, it's just across all of my data projects. I actually think of data collection as a very vital part of my data visualization process. And so I was actually just looking at my portfolio site. So I guess I'll get in on the share screen too.
Yes.
Share.
I was looking, so I was looking at like my portfolio sites, and other than my client projects. So actually, this isn't a good one. So I was looking at data sketches, which is almost all personally driven projects, and I realized I think all of them I created my own data set for. So none of this was like a readily available data set. So like for Film Flowers, I had to go and none that was as intensive as what Curel has described. Let me just put like a disclaimer. None of them I spent 8 months on. But like, I think the most intensive one I've ever done is this one, which is about the musical Hamilton. And this one was, I spent 3 days pouring through the lyrics and I kind of went and noted every time somebody talked to each other, like had conversations with each other, every time there was like recurring themes. And so this was like completely manually done. And so I think afterwards I open sourced the data here. And I love being able to collect all of my own data sets. And I think indeed, I think every single one of them, this one was a crazy one in terms of like data collection, because I went and figured out every single video that the Obamas had been on, like every single interview that they've been on. And then I went and found the equivalent on YouTube, programmatically downloaded it, then figured out the timestamps for every time they talked. And then I ran those images through like Google facial recognition or something to get like the emotions. Pretty boring in terms of the final like output, but like really intensive in the data collection. And I had like a lot of fun with it. So I think I always consider the data collection as a very integral part of all of my projects because it means that I get to be very intimate. That sounds weird. I get to get really familiar with the data sets that I'm working on. And I think I get to have like, I get to have an extra like motivation of like, I want to figure out what this data set is telling me because I already like put in so much of my time trying to collect it. And that data collection could be like, I just write scripts to hit all these different APIs. And so that sometimes is easier and it only takes me a few hours. And sometimes I find that the data is not available anywhere online. So I have to go and create it. So for example, this one was like about synchronized diving in the Olympics. And I went and literally sat through and watched every single synchronized diving a competition and like noted down all of their like breakdown of scores and like who won. At the end, I like really did not want to watch any more diving, but then also it made me like really want to finish the project because I had spent so long on it. Yeah.
it seems like the data collection piece is kind of almost ingrained in your data art practice. Like that's part of your, I guess, like methodology, if you will, and how you approach it, which I think is so awesome. I don't know, as the moderator, if I'm allowed to share anything, but I guess since I'm the moderator, I
You
get
can
to
do
make the
everything
rules.
you
Yeah.
take. Do
I
it. Do it. Share.
get to
Share your
make the
screen.
rules, don't I? Well, I want to share something because I think it's relevant to what somebody said, and I'm not going to share my screen. I'm just going to change my background for a second to show you something. So behind me is a data art piece called Intersection, that myself and my husband Owen Fernley, who I work with, we work as a pair on data art projects. Thanks for watching our son while I talk. Thanks to my son for lending me this gator shirt. I'm done my shout outs now. So this is interesting because this is a government data set that I was working on when I was still doing research for a government organization. I work for a public health organization, and I was looking at mapping, like using an image kind of recognition by pixel, where I would get a land use map out of this kind of data, this orthophotography data. But what was really funny is I wanted to use this for an art project, which is what's behind me. And in thinking about like public data sets, which this one is not, it's actually quite expensive if you were to procure it. And I had access to it because my work had access to this data. And I remember making a call to like people that the bureau that houses this data, and saying, I'd like to use this for an art project because Zona and I had an exhibition that would display this, but I needed to know if I could use it. I mean, I could get any data, but this was in the Greater Toronto Area, and this is Greater Toronto Area. And this idea is really to show how, you know, there's like urban sprawl and how there's an urbanization of suburban areas. And so what was really fascinating is like the first thing that has happened is there's this dead silence, right? Like as if somebody, you know, like unleashed whatever in the room. It was just, you know, pardon me, like, what are you asking? Why do you want to use this for art? This is crazy. And I had to go up about 5 people until I could speak to the person that could say yes to using this for art. And it did not, like, trying to explain and lobby as to why it was so important to show like authentic data that our government had and invested time and money in, and showing it back to the people as an art project. It was really interesting to kind of almost like, I felt like an advocate for like, well, we have this data, why would we not want to give it back to the people through art? Anyway, we had to like work with their legal, and there was quite a process, but I kind of thought it was relevant to share because I just got reminded of it, I think, Eleanor, and what you said about stuff that's available and kind of publicly, and how interesting it is to see representation of data art based on what's available. And is there a reason to advocate for something like this that's not available, but to go the extra like mile to try to get it? Because I had to spend time doing that as part of my, it's not even collection, I just had to like fight for it, which is such a weird thing to be doing, but at the same time felt great. Anyway, I'm gonna not share that anymore. One second. Yeah, it's interesting, this data collection tangent we are on. I love it. But I want to rope us back in because I know time is running out. People are giving us questions, but I definitely want to talk about creative coding. So, and I'll go to Wikipedia because I do think it's kind of relevant, because if you type in creative coding is a thing that's defined, unlike data art. And in it, and I don't want to read the whole thing, but really they kind of say that it's basically type of computer programming that is, the goal is to create something expressive instead of something functional. And I would love to talk about this notion of, and I don't know if people are gonna like go for this link and like edit wiki after this or what, but I really want to address creative coding and the fact that it's currently represented by a definition that says that at the very kind of essence of what creative coding is, that it's more about expression versus function, and what that means. So I want to open the floor now to the 3 of you to talk about expression versus function in terms of creative coding.
Well, for creative coding, I would say, yes, of course, you can only do, if you do generative art, and then there's no data really of art, but it's still math, right? But then you, of course, there's no meaning. Sorry, no meaning is maybe a stretch. There's a meaning, but it's not based on a data set. So there, you cannot add this more objective point of view, and it's only the subjective artist point of view, right? But for data art, it's in between, right? We said that before. It's in between data viz and and creative coding. And so because there is this data, you express something, and it has to be functional. Maybe it's not the best optimal way to present the data, but hopefully it's the more expressive or the more beautiful, the more aesthetic. It depends on what you want to do with the piece. So I would say data art is different from creative coding, different from generative art. And I'm strong advocate to maybe we should create the page data art on Wikipedia, and have this
Yes.
identity for ourselves, right? And because to me, it's different. It's really another artistic movement, which is different from the past because it's based on an more objective truth than just the artist point of view. So this is, and maybe after we can go into other type of data art. I've been experimenting lately with AI art and try also to incorporate data in it so that you basically parameterize the AI with some data so that it becomes data art now because there's like data that you can tune, and also fractals, which are by definition mostly oriented toward creative coding or math art. But I also, in some experiments, I tried to put data sets inside the fractal so that it would become data art. So maybe we can go after and talk about this. So try to expand data art and as not just an extension of artistic data visualization, but also, other things that that can do with the data.
Yeah, I actually, I feel like I have a little bit of a different idea of what data art is. Like for me, some of the stuff Carol describes would be more like data design for me or data viz, where there's like an actual objective data set. For me, data art is more like, yeah, it really is just expressive for me. Like maybe this is like one of the only like examples I could find from my work that was just data art and not data design. But this is a color clock. It tells time in color. So right now it's Cinnabar o'clock, I guess. And that's like, it was just like very fun for me to do, but it's more like it has a function, but the data is just what I made the data set to say, like, these are some nice colors that I would like to use. So, I mean, like that, I don't know where that would fit. I feel like there's no actual data there that's meaningful. But at the same time, it is functional. Like I did try to use it as an actual clock and it's not very functional, but.
Well, I think that's such a good example of creative coding because that's in Python, right? That you made that? The clock?
I think so. Yeah, that was a while ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
But regardless, it's something that like you used an algorithm, you used code to create something, and it's expressive because it tells time through color. But I don't know how it's also not functional because it still functions as a clock, but it's still creative coding because you like there's a whole creative concept behind you like using code now as a medium, if you will, to make this piece. So anyway, I will defer to Shirley for her thoughts on this.
I think it's interesting both what Eleanor and Carol said, because I feel like I think I do agree with Eleanor in that I think data art, actually I'm not quite sure. So I think data art as the artist might be purely creative. So this is where I'm like kind of not sure if I fall just then halfway between data viz and data art, because like as the artist I love it for the expression, but then I still want to make sure that there's meaning, that there's like, I love making my projects with like layers of meaning within it. And so in that sense, it's functional and it's trying to tell a story. And so maybe that means I'm not purely data art and I'm just somewhere even between data viz and data art. Or maybe it's that data art, like Carol said, because of the fact that it is encoding data, and that in its definition means that it's trying to communicate across something, that there is a deeper meaning to it. But I think it's an interesting concept of what Carol said about separating out data art from creative coding. And I think it's a very interesting distinction because in my mind, data art has always fallen into creative coding. But when Carol was describing that, it occurred to me that for me, creating a creative coding is merely the tool for me to express the data that I want. So for example, when I'm like coding interesting, like creative visuals, that is merely the tool that I've decided to use to communicate across the data and the story that I want to. And one of the things that I've been trying to do more recently is physical installations of trying to figure out how to create experiences that are completely immersive with, like interactive, like electronic components. And that is very much creative coding. But I only care about creative coding in the sense that it allows me to communicate the story that I want to in a way that I think is very interesting experientially. So maybe for me, that's the distinction of because I have a data set, because I have a story I want to communicate across, there is inherently a function to it, a functionality to it. But what I'm trying to do isn't trying to say that creative coding itself has functionality, but rather I'm trying to use that as as my medium. Yeah, it is my medium. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. It's like,
I
I arrived.
I really like that idea of like, it's more about what you're trying to do with it. Cause I think that really makes sense. I mean, like photographers take pictures and like generate millions of pixel data, but they're not that, they're probably not intending to be data artists. So then I wouldn't consider that data art.
Yeah, that's a really
That's
good
true.
point.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of thinking about like the platform and the way that it's going to be presented. Kind of, Shirley, you mentioned the physical form and kind of displaying things in the physical realm. Even that work that I showed before, that was behind me, Intersection, that was displayed on Toronto subway screens. So usually they display like the time of arrival of the train, and then they have ads, but they run this festival where they take over and they show art on instead of advertisements. And so that was made for that, which is why it's got that kind of like pan thing. And yeah, I think you're right in kind of thinking about it's not so much studying object and going, well, what are the tools. It's more about what's the point and how is it going to be presented, and then you kind of think about the tools that you almost need to start working on it. I know we have 10 minutes left, so I do want to quickly get into this last question, but maybe we can do like a speed round with it, but I think it's important. And then I have a question from an audience that I will also ask. So the speed question is about happy accidents, because I think when we enter these kind of realms of work as creatives, there's definitely a moment where something happens that's not necessarily intentional. And then you have to, react to it somehow. So I was wondering if each of you could talk about a happy accident moment that has happened in your creative practice. Maybe Eleanor, do you want to start?
Sure. Okay. I'll try to be quick. I mean, I feel like every project has a lot of ups and downs where I realize this is not going to happen with the data. So like, I feel like every single project would be that. I'd say like a happy accident that I really like is I actually like randomly generated words a lot. Like I use them for naming color schemes and that kind of thing. So those are kind of more intentional that I like a lot.
What about you, Shirley?
Yeah, so I was actually thinking a lot about this, and that basically all of my projects are like series of happy accidents, like Eleanor said, where I start with somewhere and I have this beautiful picture in my mind, and there's the starting point, and it's literally like that creative process, right? Where I like go like this and it never turns out correctly, and then I end up with something completely different from what I started with. And that's like very clear in all of my documentation of my projects. But there is one that to this day makes me so happy. And I'm going to quickly share the screen again. And so there's a friend said that Canvas, like HTML5 Canvas, makes for the most beautiful accidents. And I totally agree. So this one was when I was trying to work on my Hamilton project, and I accidentally like made a bug, and this never made it to the final, but these bugs to this day makes me so happy. So this one right here is the one that I want to show. And I call this my accidental Jackson Pollock right here. That was really quick, but right there, that like,
Yeah,
this is my accidental like Jackson Pollock. So yeah, and then also this one. I love when this happens. It never makes it to the final, but it just makes me really happy.
it's awesome. I love that. Thank you
I
for
think
sharing that.
to me, it's exactly as you guys. Sometimes, you know, it's funny. I have this idea, say, I'm gonna do this. Yeah, I see it in my mind. It's gonna look like this. And you start to work, you start to code everything, and then it looks awful. It's like it doesn't work, right? It's like, yeah, I had this idea in my mind, but the data does not allow me to do that, or I'm just not good enough to make it so pretty. So, and then you start to introduce some randomness, okay, or based on a parameter or whatever, and then it starts to look good, and like, yeah, that's what I mean, right? And you start to, you know, to play around, and sometimes you do. It's crazy. You spend like an afternoon on a piece and say, yeah, it's good. I'm gonna put it on the side, but I'm gonna work on it, right? Because I want to, you know, have deep thoughts, and you know, wow, it's a real full process. Then you spend 2 weeks on it, and then I try to do, you know, compare it, and then to ask my, you know, people around me, hey, which one do you prefer? Don't say any, like, no other information, and they choose the one that you did in 5 hours, and you're like, oh, I just spent 2 weeks, you know, doing this, and the one that I got like almost by accident or by accident was actually much better than the careful thoughts that I put in making the very big beautiful, which is actually not beautiful in the end. So I agree. Happy accidents are like the basis of what we do in data art, I would say.
I love it. That's the takeaway. Happy accidents are the basis of what we do in data art. That's funny. We had a challenge, you guys. The challenge is, it would be interesting to see what each of you would create with the same data set. Would make an interesting exhibit. Something for Makeover Monday, but for data art. There. Only if someone else gave us the data set, we would have to. I would do it if we didn't have to hunt for it. If it was like just handed to us, so that we didn't have to find it. We have some questions from audiences. One I saw earlier that I thought was really interesting is about storytelling. I'm scrolling back up to see, but maybe we can just talk about this idea of storytelling and where that would fit into data art. If anyone wants to take that, I'm throwing it out there. In the meantime, I will look for the actual question, but I know it was this. I think it was about the differences or the comparisons between how you build a narrative with data art versus storytelling with data.
Yeah, I think for me personally, it really depends on my goal at the end and my audience at the end. And sometimes it's a really simple piece where it's just for me. Like some projects are just for me and this curiosity I have. So, and I just want to make something beautiful to like just for fun. And in that sense, I don't usually put as much of a story into that, just because that's purely self-expression and purely for fun. But recently, when I've been kind of more curious about, I guess, topics that are a little bit more serious, a little bit more about like identity or race or gender, things that I've been trying to like grapple with myself in the US. These are things that I want to explore, but I also know that these are things that are very important, and because it's so serious, to try and communicate across in a good way. And I think the reason why I use data art for that is because it's a lighter way to broach a serious topic, like a kind of like a more aesthetically pleasing way to like broach a more serious topic. And when I have that, that's when I try to be a lot more intentional with the story side. And I guess for me, storytelling isn't about, you know, writing a whole narrative. I'm really bad at writing. Storytelling for me is trying to kind of have this flow with the data in the way that I present it and the experience that people have. And I still don't think I'm great at it, but it's something that I'm like trying to figure out, just being intentional with the way that I order, the way I present the data. Yeah.
Those are really good insights for thinking about it. Does anyone else want to tackle that, or do you want to wrap?
Well, I'm not very good at storytelling. I don't know how to write either, but what I try to do, I think it's in the way that I like the projects that I choose. hopefully they are self-sufficient. With a small explanation, you can basically understand what's happening. But what I like to do is also to have a second layer of interpretation, especially when I work with AI. You know, it's very trendy, right? We're all going to be replaced by robots. We're all going to die, and all this narrative that we hear, right? And that people realize that it's interesting for me to learn more about the technology because, but in a non-threatening way. And this is why the examples the pieces that I made are more playful, I would say, and fun to look at. But at the same time, they are based on data, and they talk about that deep fakes and like the use of neural networks, for instance. And I think hopefully it's self-sufficient, or when we just explain like this, for instance, when we do a chat, then people realize and they can ask questions. And then I think I prefer like the one-to-one, the one-to-many interaction than writing everything, because I'm really bad at doing this. But that's just my take on it.
Eleanor, do you want to say anything about storytelling and data art? No?
Yeah, I feel like you guys covered most of it. For me, it's more like, I guess a lot of the data kind of once you get into exploring the data, I feel like that's when I realized like, oh, this is the actual story, not what I was interested in before. So I try to be pretty flexible about that.
I mean, I think that makes sense. For me, I'm really about like science communication. Because I did a lot of academic stuff and then realized how many people don't have access to the stuff that I have access to just from a microscope lab to a data set to whatever I was doing. And so as transitioning to design and art, I still have that like passion to somehow open the wizard curtain up. So a lot of it is, so the story is just in what is it that I think that I could bring out. I think we'll do a wrap, but I want to say a couple of things. So first of all, thank you so much to all of you for joining me today and tackling this topic. And I think it's incredible, and sharing your practice and some of your work. So in terms of everyone who's online, I think what we can do is so if you're new to the Data Society, you can join a really active Slack channel on, if you go to datavisualizationsociety.com, you can see a place that you can join there. And I think if you want to ask questions, continue this dialogue, there is a data art channel that's on Slack. And I think all of us would be more than happy to engage on that channel as kind of time goes on. So if you have burning questions that you want to kind of take from here to there, I'm sure folks in that channel, ourselves included, would love to engage beyond this. And then, of course, I want to also thank Excella for this. And maybe what I'll do is I'll collectively do this, and before we go. So I have these Brian Eno, Peter Schmidt oblique strategy cards. I find them like really useful for fun creative endeavors. They're meant as prompts if you get stuck in creativity. So this one is for everybody all at once. Like there's a ton of cards. I'm just gonna pull a random one. And we're gonna end it with this, okay? For all of your creative endeavors, the card says tidy up. A follow-up to that card is work at a different speed. So there you go. Tidy up and work at a different speed. And with that, I will close off. If you're watching this after the fact and not live, you can learn all about DVS and Data Society and everything, and watch other stuff down in the description below in YouTube. Otherwise, I think we are done. That's a wrap. So thank you all so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Bye, everybody.